Over the quiet, still forests of rural Canada, a bitter dispute is raging over the true origins of ice hockey. On one side is Windsor, Nova Scotia. 4,600 kilometers to the northwest is the small community of Deligny in the Northwest Territories. Both towns claim to be the exact location where the sport was born. In the sports world, claiming a birthplace is highly lucrative. Much like Cooperstown, New York draws hundreds of thousands of baseball tourists every year, a certified origin story guarantees national relevance and a steady influx of visitor dollars. This economic incentive pushes local historical claims into aggressive monetization. In Windsor, the owners of the specific pond widely marketed as the cradle of the game recently listed the 6-hectare property for $1.38 million. This is a contest to own and profit from a highly lucrative piece of Canadian identity. To secure that lucrative financial windfall, these rural contenders rely heavily on surviving fragments of written colonial history. Deligny points to an 1824 diary entry from British explorer Sir John Franklin. Wintering in the Northwest Territories, he wrote that his men passed the time by playing hockey on the ice. Windsor's case rests on an 1844 novel by Thomas Chandler Halliburton, where fictional characters describe playing a game of hurley on a long pond. Historians routinely dismiss these accounts. Franklin's letters separate the activities of ice skating and hockey, offering no proof his men actually wore skates while playing, and Windsor's evidence is entirely fictional dialogue. By prioritizing these fragmented entries, the towns anchor their history in European colonial records, even as the evidentiary value remains thin. By the late 19th century, the epicenter of Canadian winter culture was in Montreal, a wealthy urban environment vastly different from isolated ponds in Nova Scotia and the Northwest Territories. The city hosted massive winter festivals, constructing towering ice palaces that provided a heavily funded public stage to popularize local winter sports. On March 3, 1875, a young engineer named James Creighton moved the game off outdoor ponds and inside to the Victoria skating rink, playing in front of a paying audience. Creighton introduced formal constraints to the sport. He established fixed rules, limited teams to 9 players, and swapped the bouncy ball for a flat wooden disc. Because this match featured standardized rules and a contained indoor rink, global historians cite it as the first official game, crowning Montreal the birthplace of the sport. Defining hockey purely by a written European rulebook successfully cut the grassroots outdoor history out of the official narrative. The claims out of Windsor, Deligny, and Montreal rely on a distinctly Eurocentric version of history that ignores the people who were already living and playing on the ice. Long before European settlers arrived, the indigenous Micmac people were playing their own ice game along the eastern shores of the continent, known as Uchum Kunut. The Micmac were the master craftsmen of early winter sports. They held a monopoly on carving highly resilient sticks from the roots of the ironwood, using the natural curvature of the root to form the blade. When James Creighton organized that famous 1875 indoor game in Montreal, his players took the ice using those specific Micmac-crafted sticks. The obsession with crowning a single European inventor has historically erased the indigenous technology that physically enabled the sport to exist. Formalizing the rules in a Montreal skating rink gave the game structure, but the mechanical evolution of how hockey was actually played continued far beyond the European establishment. In 1895, African-Canadian leaders in Nova Scotia formed the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes. Players in this all-black league introduced high-speed, rule-bending mechanics. Eddie Martin began using a hard slap shot, and goaltender Henry Franklin abandoned the traditional upright posture, dropping to his knees in a wide V-shape to block low shots. These athletes pioneered the butterfly stance, despite intense racism and restricted access to indoor ice time, forcing mainstream leagues to catch up decades later. The fast-paced play style we recognize today was pioneered by marginalized Black athletes, defying the rigid conventions of early Canadian sports. Zooming out across the centuries, the historical record shows there was never a single moment of invention. No lone group of people walked onto a frozen pond on a specific day and created hockey from scratch. The sport is a complex hybrid. Ancient European stick sports were forced to adapt to brutal Canadian winters. equipped with Indigenous tools and modernized by diverse communities. Hockey is Canada's national game because it is a true melting pot, forged over generations by Indigenous carvers, Black innovators, and European immigrants playing together.